Hello everyone, my name is Sarafi and I'm happy to meet you all. And today we're going to be playing Amazement. Pure Amazement. Um, so the list that I have isn't completely optimized. I've been trying forever, and even though, I spent as many gems as I could on the selection box, I managed to get 2 copies of Arlecchino. I had to dig super deep for my copy of Faces. I was not able to get a 3rd copy of Arlecchino from the original box. And I don't have Lord of the Heavenly Prison. So the deck that I'm playing is not the optimal list that everyone's running around with, but I feel like most of you wouldn't be able to build that deck anyway, considering it requires you to go through 2 different selection boxes. So let's just talk about, like, if you like pure Amazement, if you want to play like an Amazement-focused deck, I feel like this list is fairly solid, and let's talk about our options. So the skill that we're playing is Destiny Draw Pride and Soul, which allows you to take the Pride and Soul on your deck, put it on the bottom to draw 2 cards. This deck is very resource heavy. You need to have Arlecchino in your hand, along with your Comica. You can search them with Ticket, but then, if you use Ticket, you're not going to have another card. You need cards in hand to discard for Dynamiscus. Ideally, you want Arlecchino in your hand as well. And you want to have 3 cards set. So being able to draw 2 cards is pretty nice. The main version of Amazement is playing Precious Cards of the Dark, which requires you to play 9 dark monsters. And the only Amazement monster in the game that is dark is Administrator. I don't know how. So all these other monsters are light, which means that if you actually want to play Precious Cards of the Dark, you need to play 3 Arlecchinos, 3 Lord of the Heavenly Prisons, and then 3 of another card that is not an Amazement card, which has typically been DD Crow. So you can see what I'm talking about. This deck, like, if you want to play like the optimal version that's getting King of Games, it's very expensive. But that doesn't mean that you can't see the deck in action, which is what I got here. So Pride and Soul fulfills the same purpose. I would say Precious Cards of the Dark is more consistently useful to you, but it's the same idea. For the main deck, we are playing Dragon of Pride and Soul, just as a draw 2. Amazement Administrator Arlecchino. This is a level 7 Dark Psychic monster. As a soft once per turn, you can banish any number of attraction cards, trap cards from your graveyard, target that many cards your opponent controls, and destroy them. Pretty nice. It does require you to banish for cost and then target, as opposed to banishing and then on resolution destroying without targeting, which is unfortunate, but I mean, it's fine. Being able to target like 3 cards and pop 3 cards is pretty useful, and this card often will be able to resolve that effect, so it's pretty devastating when it's turn 3. You can only use each of the following effects of Amazement Administrator Arlecchino once per turn. If a trap card is activated, except during the damage step, you can special summon this card from your hand. That's your trap or your opponent's trap, which is why Amazement actually sees like a decent amount of play. It's not a deck that I think will ever see like tournament level play, but seeing as you can proc off of your opponent's traps, and your opponent will use traps all the time, this card comes out quite frequently. If your opponent normal or special summons a monster, you can target one of those monsters they control and equip a attraction trap from your deck to that target. So if your opponent summons like a monster, then that monster gets a attraction trap, but you have to target it. And then the attraction trap is activated from your deck face up, so you can use the effect immediately, which is pretty good. Oh yeah, this card's great. I would play it at 3 if I had it at 3. I would cut... I would play 21 cards. Or maybe I would cut Dragon of Pride and Soul and run a different skill. Like maybe, I don't know, maybe Link Dark Rays. But yeah, I would play 3 Arlecchinos if I had them. Next up is Amazement Abomination Arlecchino, and the entire reason I decided to build this deck is because of the artwork of this card. It's fantastic. This is a light level 7 Psychic monster. If you control an Amazement monster, you can special summon this card from your hand. Then you can add 1 Amazement Family Faces from your deck or graveyard to your hand. So Amazement Family Faces is not an attraction trap, which means that it doesn't have any synergy with any of the other cards in the deck except for specifically Amazing Time Ticket and Arlecchino. During your opponent's turn, as a quick effect, you can target one other effect monster on the field with more than 0 attack points. Shuffle this card into the deck, and if you do, special summon one Amazement Administrator Arlecchino from your deck, then change the attack of the targeted monster to 0. You can only use each effect of Amazement Abomination Arlecchino once per turn. So, Amazement Abomination can be activated during the damage step, and no one reads this card. I don't know why, they just don't. So, your opponent attacks one of your other monsters, like usually they'll attack Comica because Comica's in attack position. They attack Comica, you activate Arlecchino's effect during the damage step, you return it to the deck, you special summon your Administrator Arlecchino, and then your opponent's monster's attack points become 0. Comica crashes into them, destroys them, they take 1400 damage, and then it's your turn, and you have Arlecchino out with 2600 attack points. You attack them directly, and that's game. So, this deck is... Because it's so easy to get exactly 4,000 damage between Comica and one of the Arlecchinos, it's actually fairly consistent at ending the game on like turn 4 or 5, which is what it needs. Like this is why, like the reason why you don't see Amazement in the real game is because 8,000 damage is a lot of damage for a deck that doesn't have an extra deck. But this is good enough, and this is not a deck that can easily make use of Axis Kotalker or something else like that. A typical game-ending card. Control decks have that problem. They've always had that problem, but in particular, Amazement struggles with just ending the game. Not in Duel Links, though. Alright, speaking of Comica. Amazement Attendant Comica. When this card is normal summon, she's in a machine, by the way, which is dark. You can set one Attraction Trap from your deck. As a quick effect, you can target one Attraction Trap equipped to a monster and equip it to one Amazement monster you control or one face-up monster your opponent controls. You can only use this effect of Comica once per turn. Okay, so how Comica works is interesting. So if you declare the effect of one of your traps, like for example, if you declare the effect of Amazement Attraction Thrill Train, and it's equipped to your monster, right? Then you can chain Comica's effect, and Thrill Train will change to your opponent's monster. Your opponent's monster will get the U effect. And if you do it in reverse, if you equip to your opponent's monster, and then you activate the effect and then force it onto one of your monsters, then your monster will receive the negative effect that would hit the opponent's monster. So be very careful about that. You do not ever want to use Horror House and then chain Comica to it. It's bad. This is a cool card. It's pretty cool to be able to like swap cards out, but really primarily what you want is you want the search so that you can normal summon this card, set your Thrill Train or your Horror House, and then immediately special summon Arlecchino because you control an Amazement monster. Good. Alright, next up, we have Amazing Time Ticket. Pay 800 life points and then apply an effect depending on whose turn it is. If it's your turn, add one Amazement card from your deck to your hand. And your Amazement cards are Arlecchino, Comica, and Faces. During your opponent's turn, set one Attraction Trap directly from your deck, and it can be activated this turn. Your options are Thrill Train and Horror House in this deck. And you have a lot more if you want to build other ones. Now, it's important to note that you need to have space. So you cannot activate the second effect of Time Ticket during your opponent's turn unless you have another open board spot in your spell and trap zone besides Time Ticket. Because Time Ticket will still be on the field when you set the other card. Okay. Would I play this at 3? I would only play this at 3 if I was playing a 30-card list. And a lot of Amazement decks are being played at 30 cards, so that's probably fine, but in 20 cards, this is fine at 2. Next up, we are playing Titanum Cider. This card is in the selection box where you get Arlecchino, so you probably will have this card by the time you get 2 copies of Arlecchino. Target one face-up monster your opponent controls that will special summon from the extra deck. Change its attack points to 0, and if you do, negate its effects. If your opponent special summons a monster from the extra deck while this card is in your graveyard, except the turn this card was sent to the graveyard, you can set this card. You can only use each effect of Titanum Cider once per turn. Card's insane. You know, it's lost win, but better, and it's not limited. So yeah, I would play this at 3 if I had it. Paleozoic Dynamiscus. If I had a third copy of Ice Dragon's Prison, which is in the same box, I would be playing it instead of Dynamiscus. Target one face-up card on the field, discard a card, and if you do, banish it. And then once per chain, when a trap card is activated while this card is in your graveyard, special summon this card as a normal monster with 1200 attack points and is unaffected by monster effects. It's a fine card, but Ice Dragon's Prison does the same thing, but better, and it doesn't cost a card from your hand. Speaking of Ice Dragon's Prison, target one monster in your opponent's graveyard, special summon it to your field, its effects are negated, then you can banish one monster from both players' field that have the same type as each other. Hard once per turn. The card's great, and Amazement is one of the few decks that can actually use it, so it has good synergy with your Arlecchino, and it will kill all your opponent's monsters. So definitely play this card at 3 if you have it. Mirror Force, just funny. Just funny. Play it at 1. Amazement Family Faces. Target one monster your opponent controls that is already equipped with one of your attraction traps. Equip this card to it. While this card is equipped to a monster, take control of that monster. While you control the equipped monster, it gains 500 attack points. You cannot activate its effects, and it is treated as an Amazement monster, which means that you can special summon your Arlecchino from your hand. Fantastic. This is a great card. The only problem is that it takes up 2 slots, because you're going to be activating one of your attraction traps, and then also activating faces. But you only need to have an equipped card to the monster to target it with faces. Once faces has resolved, you can then activate Coma's effect and move the Thrill Train or the Horror House onto a different monster if you want to. So keep that in mind. And I would recommend doing that just because that way if the other monster leaves the field, you have an open board space. You don't really want to have 2 traps that equip onto the same monster. That's kind of, it clogs your board pretty fast. Alright. Now on to the attractions. First we have a Maze Attraction Thrill Train. Target one Amazement monster you control or one face-up monster your opponent controls and equip this card to it. You can activate the following effect depending on which player controls the equipped monster. If you control the equipped monster, change the equipped monster's battle position, then your opponent chooses one attraction trap in your graveyard and you set it to your field. This is a mandatory effect, which means if you do not have an open space to set an attraction trap or you do not have an attraction trap in your graveyard, you cannot use the first effect to change your monster's battle position. Keep that in mind. If it's your opponent's monster, banish the equipped monster until the end phase. That's almost always what you're going to do with this card, so just keep that in mind. Now you can, if you use Arlecchino's effect and equip this card directly to a monster from your deck, you can then use a Coma's effect to, like your opponent summons a monster, you can activate Thrill Train's effect to banish the monster that you originally equipped, then you can use Coma's effect as a Chain Link 2 to move the Thrill Train onto the new monster so you can banish that monster, for example. Pretty good. Lastly, we're playing a Maze Attraction Horror House. Target one Amazement monster you control or one face-up monster your opponent controls and equip this card to it. You can activate the following effect based on which player controls the equipped monster. If you control the equipped monster, target one effect monster your opponent controls and negate its effects until the end of the turn. Very, very good effect. I'm surprised, just because both of these effects are really good, I'm surprised this card is a rare. Your opponents change the equipped monster to face down defense position. So it's either Forbidden Chalice or it is Book of Moon. Both those cards have seen play previously, and you know, to some extent still do, in various forms. Like we play Effect Veiler and Book of Eclipse now, but we play them because they're better versions of the previous cards. So Horror House is very good, and you don't need to play it at 3, but it's a solid option at 2. I don't think any of the other attraction cards are good enough. And I don't really typically talk about like the cards that I'm excluding, but there are a lot of attraction traps, and the other ones just really don't do too much. There is a spell and trap removal one, but it's just, it only removes spells and traps if it's equipped to your monster, and you don't really want to equip an attraction trap to your monster because you want to use faces, right? You want the attraction trap to go on your opponent's monster so you can steal it. So that's why we're not playing that one. For the extra deck, you can play with literally whatever you want. I mean, you're not going to use it. I'm going to go ahead and tell you. Like, you can put 9 cards in your extra deck. You're never going to summon a single one of them. You're playing Amazement. You don't want to get rid of any of these monsters. Alright, moving on. Let's take a look at the replay. Alright, we are going first against Teller Knights, which is a deck that refuses to die for some reason. Alright, so the opponent has 25 cards. We set 2 traps. We have no other cards. We pass. The opponent summons Deneb, which lets them add a Teller Knight monster from deck to hand. Then I'm going to immediately activate a Maze Attraction Horror House because this card is one of the very few Teller Knights that doesn't summon another Teller Knight. I'm just like, okay, well, maybe if he doesn't have it face up, he won't be able to actually exceed summon this turn. But of course, he did not do this without a plan. So I activate Arlecchino's effect as a chain link 1, and then I activate the effect to actually set the monster face down as a chain link 2, and my opponent chains Satellar Knight Skybridge. So he targets the Tellar Knight monster you control, special summon a Tellar Knight monster with a different name from the deck, and if you do, shuffle the targeted monster into the deck. So he gets to dodge my bounce, and since I activated the effect of Horror House, that means I cannot activate another Horror House this turn, unfortunately. So I summon Arlecchino, and he summons Vega. If this card is summoned, you can special summon one Tellar Knight monster from your hand except Vega. So he uses the effect, and he's going to chain Cosmic Cyclone to get rid of my other card. I'm going to go ahead and activate the Amazement Attraction Horror House for no reason. Okay, and then he summons Altair, which has, if this card is summoned, you can target a Tellar Knight monster in your graveyard and special summon it, which he doesn't have any. That's fine. So I activate Arlecchino's effect to target the targeted and summon Thrill Train. I don't play with my toggle on, which is a mistake when you're playing this deck, I admit. So I was furiously tapping to try and get the option to use the effect to banish the monster. Right, you have to equip a monster, and then you have to activate the effect afterwards to actually banish the card. It's not one fluid motion. So I did not get priority, and so he just immediately exceeds summon. All right, Dark Tellar Knight, but Betamius, and since Arlecchino has already used its effect, then I did not get to use it here, which was a mistake on my part. I should absolutely have held back and just waited for him to exceed summon, because I knew it was going to be this one, and this one doesn't do anything, and then I could have just banished it, but that's my fault. Alright, so he ranks up into the Trevere effect. When it's exceeds summoned, return all other cards on the field to the hand, so he bounces my Arlecchino, and then he detaches one and attacks me directly. Okay. Alright, so Abomination returns to my hand, or Abomination gets discarded, and I draw a card. Alright, normal summon a Comica, and then I'll use Comica's effect to set a trap from my deck so that I can try and hurt him. He's going to activate Warning Point, actually, and that's good for us. So, yes, Comica could not resolve her effect, but actually we couldn't even activate a trap card this turn. Now that he has used Warning Point, I can summon Arlecchino anyway. So it works out well for us. Arlecchino effect, we banish one trap from the graveyard to pop his monster. That means that Trevere gets to come back. He summons Altair, and we're just going to use Arlecchino's effect to equip it with a banish spell. He activates Altair's effect to bring back the Trevere. Trevere cannot float infinitely. It can only float if it has a material, so I'm going to go ahead and immediately destroy it. I can't attack with Comica because of Warning Point. So he normal summons Altair again, and then activates effect. I'm going to go ahead and immediately Thrill Train here. I can't stop him from exceed summoning, but I can stop him from having 3 monsters, which means that limits the number, like, which cards he can exceed summon. He brings his second monster back, it doesn't summon anything, and he's going to exceed into Dark Rebellion, Exceeds Dragon. I only have 1900 life points left. He activates Dark Rebellion, Exceeds Dragon's effect to detach 2 materials and cut my Arlecchino's attack points down. This would mean that he could attack into Arlecchino, and I would take 2500 damage and lose the duel. However, he activated the effect of Altair to bring back the Vega initially, and Altair says, also, monsters you control cannot attack for the rest of the turn except Tellar Knights. So he locked himself. Thrill Train resolves, we bring back the Altair. It's not a summon effect, so it doesn't trigger its effect to special summon from the graveyard. We draw. We activate Arlecchino's effect. We banish 2 traps from the graveyard to pop both cards. Normal summon the Comica. And we attack our opponent directly for a game. Okay, there you go. So that is how you can use traps and you can use traps and effects to blunder your way through and still get a victory because you just simply have way too much staying power. My name is Serafi, and I was thrilled to have all of you with me.